Well, thank you so much for the invitation to speak as part of your academy. And I'm going to be talking about metropolitan planning, MPOs, or metropolitan planning organizations are, it's actually kind of a generic term in federal law for a process of people coming together in a metropolitan area to agree on what the plan is. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that and why does it matter to you and how can you get involved with that. So back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a lot of interest here in the United States in having a better highway system. Part of that came out of World War II. Where Eisenhower and others had seen the kind of damage that could be caused by bombing out rail lines, which would just stop the flow of people and goods between cities, and felt that highways, a good, strong highway system, could be important not only from a defense perspective, but also to the economy. And so in 1962, the United States passed the Federal Aid Highway Act, and part of that was oh, I'm sorry. Hello, camera. Part of that was establishing that metropolitan areas should play a role in this connected system across the country, and look at the transportation systems within metropolitan areas and how they all connect to each other and to the national highway system. So the result of this was the creation of this metropolitan planning organization process in each metropolitan area. And today there are about 400 around the country. So what does that mean? How does that play out? Well, the way I like to describe it is that an MPO is a place where people with different perspectives come together to discuss and investigate what's important and hopefully come to agree on the best course of action for the community as a whole. So a lot of the MPO's work is about consensus. It is advisory. It is bringing everybody to the table to talk about what's important and how do we go forward. So it does not, it's not a dictator. It does not have unilateral decision-making authority. It does have a mandate for broad public engagement and transparency. In our area, which is District 7 of the Florida Department of Transportation, we have 4 MPOs. The Hillsborough MPO is one. In Pinellas, there's Forward Pinellas. We also have the Pasco County MPO, and we have one MPO for Hernando and Citrus counties. The MPOs work with each other and with the Department of Transportation to develop a long-range transportation plan and a transportation improvement program. The long-range transportation plan looks out 25 years. It's required to be 20 years, but has to be updated every 5. So essentially it has to look out 25 years. The transportation improvement plan looks at the first 5 years, the next 5 years, and gets more specific about exactly what project is funded and with what money and in what fiscal year. MPOs also produce a list of priority projects. So that would be the next projects that are ready for funding and should be considered for funding. MPOs also produce a unified planning work program, which shows how we're going to use the federal planning grant dollars, which we receive and which the Department of Transportation also receives, to make sure that there is a coordinated planning process. And we show what planning activities will be funded with those grants in our Unified Planning Work Program. So MPOs sometimes talk about a 3C process. That is actually a term under the federal law. It refers to the continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive transportation planning process for the metropolitan area. So I mentioned federal grants. We receive federal grants for planning. That is part of the federal highway bill, so small set aside on it. And in addition to the long-range transportation plan that we must produce and the transportation improvement program, we're also required to have a public participation plan that lays out how we plan to inform everybody in the metropolitan area about the transportation plans and the needs and how you can get involved in that process. We're also required to have a congestion management process that monitors on a regular basis how we're doing in terms of managing congestion. And then I mentioned the Unified Planning Work Program. So there are actually a lot of different requirements in federal laws and rules about how MPOs do this kind of work. But the bottom line is we have to consider the needs of many different kinds of people and businesses and ways of getting around, just a multiplicity of different considerations that all have to feed into a comprehensive and cooperative long-range transportation plan. So who is part of this process? The board members of your MPO are typically local elected officials. So city council persons, county commissioners. In our area, we have an elected member of the school board who sits on our MPO. The MPO board is advised by a number of committees, and there are seats available on these committees, on almost all of them, for citizens to participate. So if you're interested at all in playing a role in this, I really encourage you to contact your MPO and find out what spots are available. All MPOs in Florida are required to have a citizens advisory committee and a technical advisory committee. And then, we have other committees that work on specific issues like access to schools, or helping the transportation disadvantaged, or working on intelligent transportation systems. The staff to the MPO board and to the committees draws on a wide range of different areas of expertise. So, I like to say that metropolitan planning is, 1,000 miles wide and about an inch deep. So you really need a lot of different types of expertise, including geographers, economists, anthropologists, database analysts, traffic forecasters, folks who are good with public relations. And then, as I mentioned, you are an integral part of this process, and it's protected under federal law. So just a quick recap. What do MPOs do? We plan for the future, identify needs, prioritize projects. We collaborate a lot. What MPOs don't do, we typically don't own or operate transportation facilities. There are a lot of different types of metropolitan planning organizations around the country, and some are housed with organizations that do some of these things, but for the most part, we don't typically own or operate facilities. We don't typically design and engineer roads or build or maintain infrastructure. We really are focused on planning. So the long-range transportation plan, which is sort of our big bread and butter product, it's important because it identifies major projects for funding. So this is the way that we communicate to Washington, D.C. and to Tallahassee what our priorities are for use of the federal and state grant funds that might be available. So some examples right now, the West Shore Interchange has been in our long-range plans for a number of years and is starting to get funding. And the funding is showing up in the 5-year transportation improvement program. So we're very excited about being able to address that bottleneck at the east end of the Howard Franklin Bridge. Replacement buses, that's something that we've prioritized in Hillsborough County to keep our bus system going. Complete streets projects, those are typically an important part of MPO work. And I mentioned that we look at a variety of different needs, the needs of a lot of different kinds of people. And so making those streets usable for all different kinds of people and all different modes of transportation is often an important part of an MPO work program. So how do the priorities that come out of that long-range transportation plan actually become a project and then you see something get built in your community? So I'm going to start here at the top with the MPO setting priorities for the metropolitan area. The Department of Transportation also sets priorities looking at the needs of the state as a whole. Those priorities and other programs go into the Department of Transportation's 5-year work program, which is where the candidate projects get matched up with specific funding sources. So it might be a federal grant, it might be a state program, but there's a certain amount of money and it's in a particular fiscal year and it may have some strings attached to it, so like only certain things are eligible. And so matching those up is what happens here in the 5-year work program. And then that lists out exactly what will be done when. That's listed in the MPOs, Transportation Improvement Program for the metropolitan area, and in the State Transportation Improvement Program. And then when we get to that fiscal year where the funds are available, then the project might be built either by your local district office of the Department of Transportation, or the funds might be transferred to a local agency like a city or a county to build it. Oh, sorry, go back one. So the metropolitan planning process that I mentioned has a number of steps. One is forecasting future travel demand and multimodal needs. And by forecasting demand, I'm talking about not only looking at our future growth and where traffic is likely to be. I'm also talking about as our population ages and we have more people who need bus service, for example, or some kind of transportation to get to a medical appointment or to the grocery store. We're forecasting for that kind of demand. We're forecasting for walk and bike needs. Where are schools going to be in the future? Are children going to want to be able to walk and bicycle safely to those schools? What types of active transportation systems are we going to need, not only today, but also in the future? Assessing system performance is a new, well, it's sort of new, but we've gotten some new rules from the feds about how we assess system performance. And in particular, that we're now to look at not only how we're doing in terms of safety and congestion, we're also supposed to set near-term targets for the next 1 year, the next 2 years, the next 4 years on where we're going to be with safety and traffic congestion and maintenance. We identify major issues. We do analysis in detailed planning studies, looking at specific corridors or specific sub-areas. We estimate the impacts of the transportation system on factors like air quality, for example. We are fortunate in this area that we are meeting the national standards for air quality, but we've been right on the borderline for a long time. And so we continue to monitor this and look at what it means in the future for our growth and our growth in traffic. We also have to forecast what funding is going to be available in the future and then build consensus on how we should best use those limited available dollars. Those two things together go into developing the long-range transportation plan, which is required to look at operating costs, at maintenance, at system preservation, as well as new major investments. So The long-range transportation plan, I mentioned that it is forecasting traffic congestion. It does that by looking at where is growth anticipated to be in the future. So your local government, your city, your county, has a comprehensive plan that identifies areas that are ready for growth. The idea is to plan and stage those growth areas so that the community is ready, the infrastructure is ready, and so forth. So where will growth be? That's answered in your local government's comprehensive plan, your city or county. Then the cities and counties and transportation agencies come together to talk about what facilities will be needed to serve that growth, and not just within each city, but as we're all connected to each other. What facilities are going to be needed crossing jurisdictional boundaries for the entire metropolitan area. So we come together on that, on the creation of the long-range plan. And then that information is basically dispersed again, goes back to each local government, to the Department of Transportation, to our transit agencies, to implement different pieces year by year in the 5-year work programs and 5-year capital improvement programs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the trends in our long-range transportation plan. Hillsborough is similar to the other counties of West Central Florida in having very rapid growth rates. Here's the trend line from our long-range forecasts. We thought that forecasting dramatic growth we thought that our forecasts were pretty good, but when you compare it to our actual population growth, we're still not forecasting actually as high as the actual population trend line has been. So this is quite dramatic, actually nationally, the level of growth that we are anticipating for this area. And so as we have our population growing, I mentioned we forecast 50%. It may be higher than 50%. Meanwhile, we have limited available funds to help meet needs. And so we have a forecast of our road supply growing about 11%. That's just in terms of highway lane miles. That's how much highway lane mileage we thought that we could add last time we updated our long-range transportation plan. So you combine those things and driving trips grow then 63%. You add all those things together and you have congestion growing a whopping 182% in our county. And this was our last forecast for 2040. So what does that mean in our county? We created this map to talk about our definition of failed roads. So all of these roads that are not black on this map, all of these roads that are red, orange, or yellow on this map are considered to be failed roads in the year 2040, according to our current definition of failure, which is a volume of the roadway compared to traffic volume on the roadway compared to capacity of greater than 1. So this actually constitutes 781 centerline miles of major roadway network that is considered to be failed by the current definition. That's 54% of our major roadway network. And when you think about the level of the conversations that we've been having over the last few years on some of our roadway widening projects, we're talking about a 6-mile project or a 10-mile project. And we talk about it for a long time, and finally we come together on a strategy for it, and then it has to be designed, and then we have to seek funding for it, and eventually over a period of 10 to 20 years, something actually gets built. And that's on a 6-lane segment or a 6-mile segment or a 10-mile segment. We're talking here about 781 miles. So this is the point where we start to say to ourselves, we can't build our way out of this. we're going to have traffic congestion. And maybe we need to have a different measure than volume to capacity ratio to figure out how to target our very limited resources. Because if we're only able to do a few highway projects, wouldn't it be great if those highway projects were the ones that had the most impact, benefited the most people, and did the most to reduce delay? So we're starting to shift towards some of the new federal performance metrics looking at travel time reliability rather than volume to capacity ratio. I talked a little bit about funding. This is just a quick snapshot of funding for transportation in Hillsborough. It might be similar in your county. So here you have the existing revenues for transportation. This does not include the Florida Department of Transportation's strategic intermodal system. Those are not included here because priorities are mostly set in Tallahassee for this, major statewide investments. But all of these other categories, your MPO has some role with, even if it's an advisory role. So some of the biggest ones, the local government gas tax has a piece of this. So that is up to 12 cents per gallon of gas that comes back to your county and your cities. Transit revenues here in Hillsborough, that constitutes mostly an ad valorem property tax and money from the fare box. State maintenance funding and highways that are not part of the strategic intermodal system are also a big component of this. This is largely funded out of the gas tax that goes to the state. Some smaller pieces of this, Metropolitan grants. These are federal grants that are allocated to the metropolitan area based on our population size. So in the Tampa Bay metropolitan area, those run about $30 to $32 million a year, more or less. So it's kind of a small piece. And another small piece of this pie is impact fees or proportionate fair share. What is that money currently getting spent on? Over here on the left, you see some of our existing programs in Hillsborough County, including our bus services, so think gas, paying operators, the maintenance of those vehicles, and transportation disadvantaged services like paratransit. We're also, of course, supporting our stormwater systems. This is the vulnerability reduction program, and keeping those stormwater systems in place means that you have roadways that are usable during major storm events and hopefully will be usable again as shortly after the storm passes as possible. Crash reduction is another important part of our investments. Congestion management, so there think advanced traffic management systems, smart traffic signals, bridges, and pavement. So these are the pieces of what your tax dollars are getting spent on right now. There's a small piece up at the top here that says highway capacity. And so that's money that is available after you go through all of these programs for adding lanes to our failed roadway network. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about what does that mean in terms of our current funding levels. You saw on that last screen that a lot of those programs were color-coded orange. That meant level 1 funding for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about level 1 funding, what level 1 funding means. In terms of our system preservation, it means that we're repaving our roadways every 50 years on average. And so for a point of comparison, a local roadway, ideally you'd be resurfacing that every 25 years. On the major highway network, the Department of Transportation standard is every 17 years. So the department does have funding in place for those state highways, but on a lot of our county and city roadways, we're really struggling in my county with having adequate funds. And the problem with this is that that if you don't maintain the roadways on time, they actually get more expensive to fix, because then you're dealing with not only a deteriorated surface, but a deteriorated substructure, and the entire thing has to get rebuilt. So level 1 funding is ideally not where we want to be. Aging bridges, we do think we can prioritize enough funding to replace our bridges on time, but our bus replacement program we'd like to be able to put more resources into that. Ideally, your buses get replaced every 12 years. Our crash reduction program, at our current levels, we think we can bring crashes down by 10% over the 20 years. We'd like to bring them down 50% so that we could get closer to national average crash rates. Today we could probably save 33 lives a year in Hillsborough County if we could get down to average crash rates. We'd like our low-lying major roads to be usable less than 8 weeks after a Category 3 storm. This is the type of storm that might wash out major roadways in low-lying areas. And at our current investment level, we think it might take 8 weeks to get the entire system back online. Our traffic management program, we are investing in turn lanes at intersections. We're investing in smart signal technology. And so we think our intersections will work 10% better than they otherwise would with those investments. But as you saw, we have an amazing amount of traffic congestion. So there's obviously a lot more that could be done with this program. And we'd like to be able to do more with our truck quick fix program as well. So, think about how many times you've seen a truck get stuck at an intersection and it's blocking traffic because it doesn't have space to get through that intersection. We'd like to expand our trail and side path system to provide more choices. We'd like to be able to bring that within walking distance of 25% of our population. We're not there yet. And we'd like to make sure that bus service is available to people and jobs. Right now we have frequent bus service for about 1/6 of people and jobs, and somewhat frequent service every half hour for about 2 and 5. So again, this is a very limited level of service that's available. We asked folks in our county what they thought about these spending levels, and we did a large survey with phone polling. People could vote on their phones and on the internet, and we gave people an imaginary $500 million to spend on these 4 transportation programs and some major projects. And we found that most of our citizens would love it if we could step up our investment in most of these program areas. So you can see in preserve the system, minimize traffic, reduce crashes and vulnerability, real choices when not driving. In all of these, you have a majority of folks saying they would like to step it up at least to a medium level of spending, get up above that low level of spending that we're at today. And this is the basis of our priority list for the Transportation Improvement Program. So our priority list starts with preserving the system, which you can see only 16% of folks said that the low level was the right level. Our next priorities are reducing crashes and vulnerability. You can see only 25% of folks thought that the low level was the correct level. And so this is how we structured our priorities for use of any available dollars. We did ask in our survey if folks would be willing to look at additional taxes or fees to try to reach those investment levels. And we've asked folks in a statistically significant phone survey what types of taxes or fees they might be willing to look at. And so this gives you kind of a breakdown of some of the options. These are the options that are available for transportation in our area. So sales tax is one, property tax is one, tolls. We could add 5 cents to our gas tax, impact fees. And so you can see The only one where we got more than half of our citizens supporting an increase was for the half-cent sales tax. The gas tax increase, the impact fee increases, those sometimes fluctuate a little bit when we have a down economy. Sometimes folks are less enthusiastic about impact fees. Right now we have a lot of growth, and so I think there's a lot of support for impact fee increases. Gas tax, that fluctuates also a little bit with what the gas prices are right now. Right now they're low, so this might be a good time to look at gas tax. But half-cent sales tax, that is the most versatile. It is the one that would generate the most revenue. It would do the most, and it has the most public support. So connecting land use with transportation priorities is also a really important part of this continuing cooperative and comprehensive metropolitan planning process. In our area, we've been looking at how can transportation investments support economic development, support the growth of jobs. And so we started by mapping out what we call our key economic spaces, which is clusters of jobs that were at least 5,000 and then had room for growth. These line up with our comprehensive plans in our area. This is a map of our Hillsborough county-wide vision that's aligned with our local government comprehensive plans. And this is just a quick snapshot of some of the areas that have been identified in the comprehensive plans as areas of opportunity. And there are different levels of density: urban, suburban, high-intensity urban. So these are considered areas of opportunity in our local government, in the minds of our local governments. And interestingly, they line up pretty closely with our key economic spaces. We also made sure that they line up with our long-range transportation plan, both our highway capacity projects and where we think the best spots for transit investment would be. And the other thing that I wanted to mention before we move on is that coordination with land use is one part of the puzzle. Another part is coordinating across county lines. We do have an agreement with our neighboring counties, both north, south, east, and west, to develop long-range transportation plans, to coordinate on priorities. This is just a little snapshot of our 2035 long-range plan and some of the travel analysis that we did as part of that. This is the Tampa to Lakeland travel market. Certainly we looked at travel markets in all directions. So we studied this together as part of the MPO Chairman's Coordinating Committee. And just a quick snapshot of this region. Our urbanized area, here's Tampa, and you can see how our urbanized area is defined by the census. It's connected to St. Petersburg to Clearwater, goes all the way up the US 19 corridor, up into Spring Hill and all the way up to Brooksville. It goes east along the I-4 corridor. You can see where Plant City blends into Lakeland, and here's Winter Haven right here. So you have just about a continuous urbanized area along this I-4 corridor. It goes up I-75, so we have continuous urbanization across New Tampa, Wesley Chapel, up into Dade City. And going southward, our urbanized area in Hillsborough actually comes right up to our county line where we border Manatee. And we know that there are a lot of major developments planned just south of that Manatee County line in Manatee County. So this is very shortly going to become one large economy. It already functions that way in a lot of ways. When you look at our media markets, when you look at our universities, when you look at the shipping from the freight and logistics businesses that are here at that I-4, I-75 interchange area, and they're shipping north and south to this entire Tampa Bay region. We're very much tied together, and we are planning together. Our structure is the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee includes Not only the 4 MPOs of DOT District 7 that I mentioned to you earlier, but also 2 MPOs that are in DOT District 1, and that's Polk and Sarasota Manatee. Our MPO staff directors get together once a month to coordinate on things, and we're advised by a number of technical teams. We've been meeting for more than 2 decades, but just in the last few years, we have merged this group into the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, so that we would all be speaking with one voice, singing off the same song sheet in terms of our regional plans. So the MPO in each area, the MPO in your area probably has some initiatives that are specific to your area. For example, the Pasco MPO has been working very hard on an initiative in the State Route 54-56 corridor and have a great connection east-west across Pasco all the way, more or less from the coast all the way east through Wesley Chapel. And some of the other MPOs are working on other initiatives in their specific areas. Tampa Bay Next and the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, of course, are looking at connections between all of our counties, highway improvements, regional transit improvements, how are we all connected together. In my area, we've been working very hard on a Vision Zero action plan, which is a vision of 0 traffic fatalities. This comes out of our very strong citizen advocates who would like us to be working towards safer streets. And I'm going to use this as a segue to introduce Jean Duncan, who is the Director of Transportation and Stormwater Services for the City of Tampa. And we've been very fortunate to be able to collaborate with Jean and her team over the years to work on Safe Streets projects. And Jean's going to talk a little bit about some of those things.
Thank you, Beth, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of information about the planning process as it relates to the City of Tampa. I do want to mention that the quick outline that I'll share with you is representative of many of the other cities within our county. So what I explain on what's occurring within the City of Tampa is very similar to what you would see in other cities. A couple other quick points I would like to make, taking some of the things that Beth said. She mentioned that cross-county coordination. We certainly support that cross-county coordination and also coordination with all of the transportation agencies. Our goal is to have a seamless plan. When people drive from one county to the next, they don't necessarily care where they are in terms of the county limit or the city limit. So we need to make sure our plans are in sync with our neighbors around us and make sense in terms of how we are prioritizing our work. Also, just want to mention that you did hear a lot of information about the planning process. Many of us have been doing this for many years, so even though it's a lot of new information for many of you, it really is a very well-oiled machine in terms of how we work through these processes together, and we're always trying to improve on the efficiencies as well, so we minimize any bureaucracy and maximize our time sort of producing good plans for the citizens of our counties. A little bit about some of the things we do within the City of Tampa, again, similar to other cities. We develop a mobility plan, and we take that plan from the bigger blueprint that we follow, which is the long-range transportation plan that Beth was talking about. The mobility plan that we develop includes capacity projects for our intersections and our roadways, but it is a multimodal mobility plan. We're always looking to repurpose our roadways and provide safer opportunities for everyone that uses that roadway, bicyclists, pedestrians, and others, also recognizing the growth that's occurring around those different roadways. We often focus on particular areas of the city, for example, the Gandy area, New Tampa area, Bayshore area. Those of you familiar with the City of Tampa know some of these areas. We take a look at different areas in terms of growth issues that are going on, congestion issues, safety issues, and create a subset of priorities that we then work towards getting to the capital project stage and out for construction. We often partner with the MPO. They have some planning funding opportunities often that they make available to the local governments. And we try to take advantage of those opportunities. We're always looking for additional monies to progress the specific projects we have within the city of Tampa. And we enjoy these kind of opportunities to work on various things such as walk-bike plans or focusing on particular corridors within the city limits. This gives us a chance to work closely with the MPO staff. They're often working at a 30,000-foot level, as Beth mentioned, and this gives them a chance to get into the weeds a little bit about particular projects within the city. That helps their planning for other things they're doing within the county, gives them more familiarity with issues that are going on with the city, and again, helps the coordination that we have with their staff so we can keep working together closely on progressing all of the priorities for our county. The city of Tampa has a capital improvement planning process, as do all cities. That process is under the framework of the comprehensive plan that we have for the city of Tampa. That comprehensive plan is a reflection of projected growth and how we want that growth to occur within our county and our city, and the roadway network that needs to support that growth. So we recognize the comprehensive plan and we recognize the long-range transportation plan that Beth and her team produce. And again, those are blueprints that we are using as we plan at a smaller scale level within the city of Tampa of our set of projects. We produce a 5-year capital improvement program, and we work that program on a yearly basis. We have a 1-year budget that's approved within the city, again, similar to other cities around. Our fiscal year starts in October, so we have certain milestones throughout the year where we have different stages of development to get that budget prepared, get it submitted to our city council and out to the public for review and consideration, and then of course approval. And so we're always adding on what we call the new 5th year to our capital improvement program. As we complete 1 year, we add another year's projects in and keep marching our way through the various set of projects, trying to get those out for construction. The other important process that we work with the MPO and the DOT on is the Transportation Improvement Program. This is a 5-year program, again, a shorter range portion of the long-range transportation plan. We always go back to that plan, which again is our blueprint that we're all following to make sure our priorities are lining up in a manner that's improving our transportation system in the most efficient way. So the city, as other cities do, we submit our projects to the MPO for consideration. There's an application process we go through. There's a screening process that's utilized with a set of criteria. So we're making sure that we're using a quantitative methodology to select projects, and we try to take out as much subjectivity as possible to make sure we're making the right decisions on what should be prioritized within that transportation improvement program. From there, the next step is to get those projects in the FDOT work program. We often focus on projects that are not City of Tampa roadways. For example, we've got the 40th Street, the 40th Street project, which is a county road. And we also had the Palm Avenue City of Tampa Street that we focus on and got funded through the DOT work program. And we also had some other projects that are either county or state that, because the city determined they were a priority, we got those into the work program and were able to progress those projects because, again, they were a city priority. The other agencies weren't able to put that focus on them, but working with them and utilizing their monies, we were able to get those funded into the DOT work program. apologize for the little logistical issue we're having with the slide. But that's just a quick summary that I wanted to provide you on the process that we use in the city of Tampa to work with the MPO planning process and make sure from that 30,000 foot level down to the actual construction of projects, things are being done in a very prioritized manner, and we're getting projects out as quickly as we can. So with that, I'm going to open up for questions for either Beth Alden or myself. If anyone had any questions that they might want to ask either one of us, we would be glad to try to provide an answer. And if we're not able to do that today, we can certainly follow up through our team here at DOT to give you that information that you're looking for.
We have gotten a few questions. The first one is, why is congestion estimated to grow 183% at such a faster rate than population growth, driven mileage growth, et cetera? So that's directed to that.
Yes, great question. And so it has to do with the level of congestion that's out there today. So I mean, what you don't see on that slide is how much capacity is left on our current system right now. So if you have plenty of capacity and you add 50% more people, then maybe you can accommodate a lot of that and you don't have as much growth and congestion. If you have not so much capacity on your transportation network right now and you add 50% more people, then you have almost exponential congestion growth, because that last little 5% is what creates gridlock, and then you've got hours of delay.
Another question is, since gas tax is a declining funding source, what other local funding alternatives has the MPO considered?
So the local funding sources that are available are the ones that are authorized under state law. We have reached out to see if there are opportunities to create new funding sources under state law. We haven't been successful with that yet. But the ones that are authorized today are property tax, gas tax, and sales tax, primarily.
This is related to the volume to road capacity. It says, many stuck in traffic would disagree that road volume to capacity isn't a meaningful goal. You mentioned instead you'd be using federal guidelines. What are these federal guidelines, and will they help ease traffic congestion and help traffic flow?
It's a great question. And what I meant by that is that when 54% of our major roadway network has a failing volume to capacity ratio, then we need to find some other way of figuring out how to target our limited resources. We need to have a data-driven process. So the new federal measures look at how reliable is the speed and travel time along a roadway. So is it going to take you the same amount of time at rush hour to get through that segment of highway as it would at 3 o'clock in the morning? And we know that in a lot of cases, those travel times are a lot different at 5 p.m. than they are at 3 a.m. When you get down to that really gridlock point, and you start having, it starts getting aggravated with traffic accidents, and the travel time really escalates. As you saw, for example, on the Howard Franklin Bridge earlier this year, there were a couple of times when we had such significant traffic congestion that it took folks an hour or 2 hours to drive across the bridge, which is a distance of 6 miles. That is a highly unreliable travel time at that point. So looking at a travel time reliability performance measure allows you to really zoom in on the areas where you have a really significant problem and where you should try to target your resources.
Another question is, in Florida, we had a recent lesson that we need to be able to evacuate a lot of people in a short amount of time. In Miami and Orlando, both Tri-Rail and Sunrail were shut down 2 days in advance of Irma and weren't helpful to get folks to shelter. And both took over a week after Irma to get back online. Is hurricane evacuation and planning part of the planning process?
Yes, definitely. And so evacuation routes are part of the prioritization process. There's actually another type of congestion forecasting that's done specifically for hurricane evacuation. At this point, we are not using commuter rail systems for evacuation, and so we don't have that as part of our model. But certainly there's been a lot of discussion about how the transportation systems that we do have, how those would be used in evacuation conditions. So agreements about contraflow operation of major roadways or of specific lanes. I think that's being looked at again as we talk about the managed lanes, the express toll lanes that are proposed for at least some of our region, and so there's some opportunities there, and those are being evaluated actively right now.
Another question, you mentioned the committees for the MPOs. What are other ways citizens can get involved in the process? And this is to both of you, both with the MPO, long range transportation planning, and then at the city level as well.
Sure. So we also create groups when we do projects in specific areas. If you don't want to have to spend time coming to our office or our meeting, then typically we will provide opportunities where we'll go to your meeting if we're working on a study in your area, for example. So like one that's going on right now is the Brandon East-West Corridors study, which looks at redevelopment opportunities and some of the congested major roads in Brandon. And can you do anything there in terms of widening or looking at lane operations to do more with the roadway that's out there right now, or transit options? Would any of those things work? And so as we're playing through what is feasible and asking the engineers what is feasible in those areas, we're now at a point where we're ready to bring some of that information out to community groups. And so, for example, if you have a homeowners association or a business meeting in that area and you'd like to hear more about that study, I really encourage you to get in contact with us. And I'm sure you have my contact information. Our office phone number is 272-5940.
And within the city of Tampa, we try to put information out as frequently as we can on our website so that anyone who has an interest can easily access that information and see what's going on. To those that want to get involved even a little bit more, we see most of our active participants working either through their neighborhood association or through attending our projects we have for our projects. Almost every single project we do, oftentimes even maintenance projects, we're having a public information meeting. And so those are the two really main ways that our Tampa citizens get involved, is through attending meetings, public meetings, working with their neighborhood associations, or being active in their neighborhood associations. And we do have some committees, such as the budget committee, that we have residents in the city that are able to sit on, who can get sort of a behind the curtain view of the budget as it's being prepared, and they can work through their city council representative to participate in that process. So we like to be transparent, and we welcome the interest people might have in getting more involved in our projects and our processes.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Well, we really want to thank everyone for your participation with us, those that have joined us here today and those that are joining us online. Please, we want to encourage you to continue to participate in our Citizen Transportation Academy. Please continue to join us in person, join us through our live webinar, or watch us at your convenience on tampabay.next.com. We have several more sessions in our series. Next week, October 13, we'll be speaking to Introduction to Transportation Project Development. On October 20th, join us for the Introduction to Transit Modes and How They Work. On October 27th, how transportation projects are funded. And on November 2nd, which will be a Thursday, please join us for congestion management strategies. And if unable to join us for any of these, we invite you to view them at your leisure, again, on tampabay.next.com. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next week.